Hank Parker Sr. reaction. Great interview. Great guy. Thanks to anybody who's listening to that show. I know that, you know, our listeners sort of trickle in over time. Everybody gets to it when they get to it, but I think everybody's going to enjoy that one. There was a mega moment for me, right, when he's talking about how inadequate Dad felt as a father. And, man, that was a heavy, heavy moment. I wanted to say something. You know, I'm not going to apologize for all of the Dale Earnhardt conversation that we have. I'm not going to apologize for becoming Earnhardt or whatever we do in the future with that, or all the guests that we have come in here that talk about Dad. That's important to me. I get a ton from it. I think our listeners enjoy it. I know that we go heavy on the Earnhardt stuff. I know we do. Sometimes it's heavy for me. Sometimes it's a little bit too much for me. But most of it's necessary, and it's part of the process to get through the conversation. But yesterday was an incredible opportunity for me to talk to somebody that spent a ton of time around my dad in the most unique moments, away from the race car, when Dad was just Dad. You know, we often wonder who people really are. You only learn that about people in certain scenarios where they're very comfortable and they let their guard down, and Hank spent a lot of time with Dad when he had his guard down.
Yeah.
And so we got to learn a lot. I enjoyed that. And even, you know, almost 25 years after Dad's passing, I'm still learning new things. Dude, I mean, I hoped he felt inadequate about being a dad. I really, you know, wished he would have been more direct and transparent. What was my thing? Candid. I wish he'd have been a little more candid with us. Mm-hmm. It wasn't his thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But to hear Hank had this conversation with him, man, it really hit home. So I know you want to comment about Hank. I loved learning about his career. I had so much more that I really wanted to glean from the conversation about him becoming a professional bass fisherman, and then turning that into a multi-million-dollar business as a spokesman, and retiring from the championship tour on top at 37. I know that, you know, the money wasn't all that great in terms of what he could and would make during doing his TV show. But damn, you know, your heroes, the people that you look up to in sport or entertainment, you want them to be out there competing for your entire life, right?
Yeah.
Anytime, like, you know, Peyton Manning or Joe Montana and all these guys that I really admired retired, it's like, damn, why does that have to happen? Why can't they just keep on playing while I'm alive, right? I want to enjoy watching them play forever.
Yeah. Did it make sense, though, what he said about why he quit?
Absolutely. I mean, when he asked me, or when he told me that, you know, hey, man, my kids leaving to go do a tournament and my son wanting me to be around was all that I needed to hear. I mean, that made perfect sense to me. And you don't think about those things. I did not think about that. The answer, I already knew the answer, but I really didn't. You know, so that was pretty profound. That was cool. I love being able to learn everything about that. I have so much more that I'd love to sit down and talk to him about, and I think it's going to have to happen on a fishing boat somewhere, you know, the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, right.
So, anyways, everybody, I appreciate your engagement and how excited you were about it, Mike. You brought some great stuff to the interview. Your conversation about you question about the song for the TV show. I mean, that stuff was perfect. I thought you did a hell of a job. And, you know, I had these personal moments that kind of knocked me out and kind of laid me out of the interview there for a little while. And you had some great stuff to bring to the table and carried the interview.
There was some heavy moments, man. Heavy moments that I don't know what to do with them either. Like it wasn't just the fact that your dad loved you; he just didn't know how to tell it. There were other moments that were really profound. I had a couple takeaways from it. One, I think that we kind of knew this about your dad, at least from all the other people, the Ned Yost, the Richard Childresses that have been here, is that. Of course he loved his kids. There's no question about that. And there was no question that he also he's not the kind of guy that says, I love you. He's not the only one, frankly. And if you really get down to the nitty gritty, and you and I can have a conversation about this all day long because we're both dads. But if there's the perfect dad out there, I've never met them. And I certainly am far from the perfect dad. And to be honest with you, all of us are basically trying to figure out how to compensate for our inefficiencies. Yeah. Maybe I am I love you, girls. I love you. I say that to my daughters all the time. But there's something else that I'm not doing well, right? And I'm trying to. It's a constant quest of trying to find out, where do you lack? Do I not ask enough about what my daughter's day is like? And when they say, it was fine, but they don't give me details. Should I be pressing harder to know every detail? And every day, it's like, I wish there was a manual for parenting. Yeah. And Dale Earnhardt was not impervious to that. Dale Earnhardt had his deficiencies, and he was. The thing that I gather through all these conversations is that behind the scenes, he had the compassion and things. He was not wired to show it. He just wasn't wired to show it. Frankly, I do see a lot of that in you yourself. I see a lot of those similarities. Not to say that you're not compassionate, and I'm not around you and your kids. I mean, how you are with your kids, but I'm saying is that sometimes, we choose not to go show our vulnerable sides to the public. That makes him normal, frankly. So that was one of the things. The other thing I left the conversation with is, there's only a handful of people on the planet that knew your dad to the core, and it's not his family. I'm convinced of that. It's not his family. It's his hunting buddies, right? There's just 3 or 4 people, Richard Childress, the Ned Yost, the Hank Parkers. There's a few other ones. And the point I want to make on that is, I don't think that's as unusual as I would have originally thought either. Frankly, your friends are the ones that ultimately end up knowing the details that you don't want your parents to know. You don't want your kids to know. It's the people that you grew up with, or the people that are closest to you. That is, I'm not saying in every case, but it is usually your friends that know the goods and the bads. And I don't think that that's unusual. I do think that the hunting buddies and the hunting clubs is where your dad probably felt like he was surrounded by the people that loved him the most, yeah. Right? That's the other thing. He
trusted him, man.
And the last thing I will say is I could have talked to him about fishing all day. I mean, I swear to God. And the one thing that we didn't ask, he went from in 75 being humbled at that fishing tournament. He goes back and basically goes to school for a year where he's just learning lures and everything else. He comes back in 76 and wins the championship. I wanted to know so much more about, hey, do you go scout those lakes? Like how many times do you got to go fish a place to know the honey holes and that kind of stuff? And maybe he doesn't want to tell you that, right? Because who knows? But like you're right. He was a fascinating interview on multiple levels.
Yeah. The hope for me one day is that our podcast and our show gets so I hope that one day I'm able to put that kind of time into it to where we give you the interview that you got this week, which is more, skimming the high points, but then have that kind of conversation about, man, here we're going to go into the weeds about bass fishing, right?
Right.
And we'll put that in this show. We'll put that in this little 30-minute spot. So if you're interested in that, you can find this right here, right? But if you just want to know about the man and his path and his story and his relationship with my dad or all that, it's all in this big piece, right? Because I'm with you. When he walked out the door, I was like, damn. Experience the thrill of the racetrack like you're in the driver's seat with DraftKings Sportsbook. Bet on your favorite racers and feel the rush of every pass, pit stop, and victory like never before. Right now, new customers can turn $5 into $200 instantly in bonus bets. Bet 5 on anything to score big, no matter what goes down on the racetrack. Check out Dirty Modo every Thursday, where they will handicap the field, and they'll recommend bets to watch for the upcoming race. With props, parlays, and more, you'll have bets to follow all race long. The racing action doesn't stop till the checkered flag drops. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and join with code DJD. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. That's code DJD only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. I really wanted to know more about his expertise, his career, his job, and how he learned to get better, and yeah, just what you're saying. There was a couple things that I went home and I sat on the couch and I thought a little bit about that conversation that he had with my dad, and I guess there were a couple things that he told me. That there was that one conversation that he had about, being inadequate as a father. And then there was a couple other conversations that he had. And I think at the end of the, if I sat there for 10 minutes, right? I think at the end of it, I got up with the feeling and the emotion that it was a good reminder. The conversation with Hank was a nice, needed reminder of how much I need to appreciate my dad for the opportunity and the foundation that he laid for me and Kelly and Carrie and Taylor. And as you get removed from his life and being around him and being reminded daily by that very thing, right? Everything you have is because of him. Everything at your fingertips is because of him. The further removed from that you are, and the more you go on with your own life, the more I think you take a little credit, for yourself, and less credit to the origins of everything. And so it was a good reminder for me to remember that all the blessings that I have and the life that I live were the first handful of dominoes that got me here were set up and knocked over by him.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it was just a good reminder that, because sometimes I get in this sort of, I get mad that he's gone. I get mad that he's not here. We're learning about him in some of these conversations with like Tony Furr talking about the old days in the 70s when he was imperfect. Wasn't a great person. And did some things that he probably wouldn't want to admit to, right?
Right.
Being an idiot. And I just get sometimes I just kind of need. It was a nice reminder that hey, Dad certainly provided us a lot of opportunity that we still are benefiting from him every day. And I always do remember that, but that was just a really nice reminder to really embrace some of that and appreciate that, and be thankful for that, And so
it was a good reminder for all of us. If you were lucky enough, like I am, to still have my dad,
yeah,
the appropriate response and what I did was call my dad.
Right.
I mean, I still have the privilege to be able to call my dad. And tomorrow that may not be the case. Next week it may not be the case. But the relationship you have with your dad, and this will be the way, I'm sure, with my kids. They'll have some sort of impression on me that may not be fully formed, right? Like they don't know all the details of why I might have done something. Yeah. And we're privy to some of these things these days. What a blessing it is.
Yeah.
And that's the appropriate response, is to go, man, did my dad not, he always had my back. I just didn't ever know it all the time. Or, man, my dad was always working his butt off. And I always looked at it as he was never there. But, in my dad's case, he's working 3 jobs at times. And all I know is that he wasn't at my basketball game.
Right.
Well,
Why wasn't that?
Yeah. And so I think the appropriate response for everyone. It's not just you.
Yeah.
We were talking about your dad, but man, I bet there's a lot of people out there that it resonates with. That either has good relationships with their parents, or even relationships that may have had fractures along the way.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask you this though. What did you think about what Hank said about how, if not for his conversation with your dad on the front porch of wherever they were, you would have never even had that race car?
I know. I told Amy about I told Amy the analogy. I told Amy the whole story last night, and I said, the analogy used about the dad buying the soft drink and drinking it in front of his son and not getting his son one. And she thought that was she really wanted to meet Hank. After I told that story, she's like, I really like to meet this guy. I want to hang out with him. And I'd never thought about it like that. He had a great point. I always felt a little bit guilty for wanting Dad to be a bit more of a provider in terms of just physical parts and pieces and the ability to go race, right? I would walk up to Dad and say, I really want to become a race car driver. And Dad would say, well, you go over there and clean out the horse barn. Show me you want it. Show me some initiative. And I'd go clean the out of the stalls. But then he'd be like, all right, now clean the tools that are out on the counter and put them back in the toolbox. Sweep the floor. And, after a while, you're like, how long do I got to do that, right, before
I get to drive a race car?
How is this working, right? Of course, you're 12, 15, 14 years old, and you're like, okay, well, how much of that nets progress, right? And I didn't understand what he meant. What he meant was just show me you want it. If you're out there giving it your all, even when it's cleaning the shop or whatever, I'm gonna support you. And he would have done the necessary things
without a doubt.
In fact,
the story that you give about, and you've given it in the past, about moving that paint bucket, I believe it was, go move that from there across the room, and you're like, what the hell does this got to do with anything, right?
So when we did get our, and the street stock car was all me and Carrie. Like, Dad pointed in the direction of the junkyard, but man, me and Carrie went and found the money by ourselves. We went and bought the car. We went and found the roll cage. We went and climbed underneath all those cars out in the junkyard to get spare parts when we bent ball joints and A-frames and all. Dad telling Hank that I needed to go to the junkyard. We did that. Me and Carrie were out there under those cars that been there for 30 years with the snakes and everything else. We did it. We rode around in the back of our S10 trucks with little toolboxes that were only there to go work in the junkyard. Toolbox sliding around in the bed of the truck everywhere you went, slamming into all corners. We did that. But when we got our late model stock stuff, that's when that little shed of guilt came in, right? Because it was like, oh, well, Dad bought this, right? I'm not creating this. I'm not getting the money for this. And so I always kind of felt a little bit guilty that, we did get some of those things given to us to go race. We'd literally, we'd go down to Myrtle Beach, and Gary Hargett would have a blank check to buy the set of tires and the pit passes. And that money came from a deal Dad did with Mom and Pops and a partner that he already had. He didn't have to part that money out to me and Kelly and Carrie for our late model team. He could have kept it. But he parted out $100,000 for all three of us to go race on. We split that three ways and went and raced. You could race for $30,000 a year at Hickory or Myrtle Beach.
That's huge.
Yeah. Other guys didn't have that, right? But so I felt a little bit guilty about that all those years. But it was necessary for me to have the opportunity to make it to Xfinity, to Cup. And when I got to those levels, right, I'm still driving Dad's car. I'm still under under his arm, under his wing. No job security issues. I'd be in a room with Michael or Truex and Park at a photo shoot or whatever, and I'm standing there going, these guys got to work. They got to work to earn this. I don't. I mean, I could half-ass this day. I'm family, right? I might have half-assed it, but not because I thought I was family. Right. I half-assed it because I was probably hungover or just didn't get shit. But, you know, I mean, I thought about those things. I was aware. I was self-aware. But it's interesting for Hank to sort of set it that way and go, look, you know, you think he needs to be in the junkyard because that's what your dad was doing. He was in the junkyard.
Yeah.
But your son sees you riding around in an airplane and, you know, racing a race shop with 20 cars in it. And he's like, why can't you help me? I get it. That was good though. I had a great time listening to him. Like you say, man, let's just hope we can get another opportunity to sit down and talk to him.
Did you trade text or anything with Hank Parker Jr.?
I called him. We talked.
Did you? Because I was texting with him too.
I called Hank Jr. on the way home and talked to him until I got to the gate.
Good.
He's doing good. Kids are good. Family, house, land, job. Hank Jr.'s doing great.
By the way, speaking of Hank Jr., I did not know this, but maybe you did. But him talking about that wreck, the wreck.
Billy?
Oh, Billy.
Yeah.
It was Billy that wrecked at Chicago.
I went back, you know, we'd have to talk to Billy. I'd never really heard about that, and I don't remember really Hank getting into it, Hank Jr., talking about it too much. I went and watched that race yesterday.
Okay.
After the conversation. I did a lot after the conversation. Called Hank Jr., looked at this race with Billy from Chicagoland. It was a very normal accident. He gets a little loose in the middle of the 1 and 2. If this is the same incident, it's the last race he runs for Rusty Wallace. He's replaced the week after. He backs into the wall, left front. He backs it in, left rear. Left front hits the wall, so it's kind of a driver's side impact. It didn't look hard or nasty, and I believe he gets the car out back on the track and runs laps and moves forward about 6 or 7 positions before the race is over. So, but I've seen wrecks like that can cause damage and can get you hurt, and there's no telling whether he didn't have the right, you know, padding on the headrest or whatever. We'd have to have Billy come in here and tell us about it.
Well, I mean, you've experienced that yourself. I mean, like the one that caused that concussion that ultimately put you in Pittsburgh. You know, I remember those wrecks. Was it at Michigan? You know, I you know,
they all blend together.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I'm sure. But the you know, the things that were causing concussions,
shouldn't.
You know, sometimes aren't
Didn't
the ones that look
they
like.
Should,
yeah, right.
Hey, if you like that video, like and comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss another piece of Dirty Boat Media content.